Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Thanks for the excellent turnout. I hope you're off to a really good start. My name is Barry Wardell. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of Cloud Services at Atos, and I'm going to help take us through our story around mainframe modernization today. My partner here is Brad Foster, but I'll give Brad a chance to introduce himself in a moment. Quickly, just from an agenda standpoint, we're going to take you through, obviously, the mainframe modernization story. We'll give you just a quick spiel on who Atos is, what we do, our partnership with Atos and AWS. We're going to take you through a bit of a challenge statement, right? And why we're all here and trying to resolve the mainframe problem that we have. And then we're going to share with you an engagement approach, as well as some of our actual modernization approaches that we take today, which is really the heart of our message. With that, we'll go through a quick capabilities view and then a brief client success story. So again, thank you all very much for being here. We're really happy to be on stage sharing our story. Brad, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Barry. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for attending. As Barry said, Brad Foster, my role at Atos is I'm the global head of cloud portfolio, and really that just means I'm trying to figure out what companies are trying to do with cloud and how Atos can help them do that, and then how do we pull a portfolio of services and offerings together and invest in things that can help our customers, and how do we invest with our partners like AWS and moving the ball forward in the market. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, specifically around mainframes and things we're doing there. Your first question is probably, these guys have to be way too young to even know what a mainframe is. I'm sure you look upper 20s-ish, I guess. But jokes aside, I've gotten to know more about the mainframe than I thought I ever would. I didn't ever work in the mainframe. I was always coming up in the client-server world, and I've been working in cloud for about 10 years now, since AWS had a few products and Google and Azure didn't even exist. But it's really been interesting to help companies think about these huge monolithic things that are sitting there in their data centers and how do they get them to the cloud and modernize those things. Quick backdrop on Atos. It's not as big of a brand in North America as it is in Europe. Very big brand in Europe, over 100,000 people, strong, 70-plus countries. And a very strong tradition in, over the past 20 years, data centers, application modernization, management, et cetera. And as the cloud has obviously come into play, we've really invested organically in growing that capability, as well as via acquisitions. And so now we're helping people modernize, not to on-prem, but obviously modernize to the cloud. And so we really help our customers through that journey with the strategy and approach, wrapping it all. So we know this is big and complex, and so we bring a kind of consultative mindset to helping people do that. If you go to the next slide, in terms of just the core capabilities in our partnership with AWS and things we focus on, we'll obviously be talking about the mainframe modernization today. The cloud acceleration, that really talks about that journey. How do we plan for accelerated move to the cloud, modernization of applications and data and AI? The next point, data and AI, we've done some really cool things actually with AWS and some of our customers in that space, bringing that as we to the mainstream. IoT, Edge and IoT is another really growing space for Atos. A lot of our core traditional on-prem capabilities with Edge play in nicely with all of the management of the distributed Edge and IoT compute, and then the data and AI capabilities kind of playing in well there. Data center to cloud is something that is part of the mainframe story. To get out of a data center, you actually have to get out, move the mainframes or SAP or Oracle and these big things. So that is our capability of stitching together a lot of things to help in that multi-year plan to get out of a data center. We can help with a very strong SAP practice, help people run SAP on AWS and get that infrastructure off your data centers. And then the last two are really the more tip of the spear things we do in digital transformation, and how do we increase agility and bring kind of the new modern industry-based solutions to market. And with that, we have a lot of AWS certified individuals, 675 plus experts, and 1,000 plus certifications, and other things in our partnership, such as we are an advanced consulting partner and a managed services provider as well. So I won't hit on all the bullet points there, but that's a quick background of who Atos is. Feel free to, there's many Atos people here, feel free to connect with us throughout the days here at reInvent. And with that, I'll turn it over to Barry for the next slide, talk a little bit about jumping into the mainframe.
Thank you, Brad. I want to emphasize one point that Brad made on the data center to cloud. That's a really important part of the conversation because it's a powerful cost lever for many of our customers. Right? We have a concept and an approach where we work really hard to self-fund these transformations, and data center exit, data center optimization is an important lever that we use for that. So it's not necessarily the sexiest thing to talk about, but it's an important part of the modernization journey. So shifting into some more of the specifics, if you're in the room, then you're presumably a stakeholder in a mainframe ecosystem to some degree. There's no disputing the relevancy of the platform, right? It is the bread and butter, the heart and soul of most exceptionally large enterprises and even for mid-sized businesses. If you think about it from a revenue standpoint, these companies absolutely rely on these mainframe environments to serve their business. And if the mainframes don't run, then their business is materially affected, right? From a transactional perspective, mainframes continue to be the source of record for many applications. Even as you use your phone and you're doing banking, those transactions in many cases are still going through mainframe. So there's no question about the relevancy of mainframe. Now, with that is the challenge that we have with the mainframe ecosystem. And Brad, you want to kind of take us through that?
Yeah, so I think I'll talk about this from kind of a company's perspective that's faced with this, and then as Barry goes through the presentation, interject a few questions that we find a lot of companies asking us as we tackle this. So today, obviously mainframes have decades of development, and you're dealing with this situation where to add new features and functionality, it's hard. It's a long time to market because of that spaghetti code, all the dependencies that companies face. Minimal flexibility to make those changes, new regulations come out, et cetera, and you have to go in and change this very big monolithic set of code. It takes time. The costs are increasing. The vendors that provide core mainframe services and your MIPS costs, et cetera, are going up. And that technical debt is rising because you can't move fast enough. And finally, I think one of the biggest risks is a lot of the talent. The people who know COBOL and assembler and all these things are retiring, and so the talent pool is shrinking, and that's a major risk when you have an issue or you need to maintain the mainframe on an ongoing basis or continue to make updates. And as this big monolith is there, the world is obviously moving forward at record pace, and that's why we're all here. And we're all here, more announcements of amazing things that AWS is doing, and we're all jumping on that bullet train as we go. And that is everything. Needs to be agile and business driven. It's all data and AI infused. It needs to be automated, right? The whole DevOps and DevSecOps capabilities. And so that's what everybody wants, and that's what you need to compete. And that's at odds with what this mainframe and the challenges are, and that you have these 40 years of complex code to deal with. You have fear of business disruption, as Barry mentioned. These things are at the heart of people's businesses, of banks and insurance companies and manufacturers, et cetera. And for that to go down, it's extremely disruptive and risky. It's a difficult business case. You don't just take something that's been there for 20, 30, 40 years and overnight flip a switch and have the money to just make it work financially. So Barry's going to talk about how do you make this work in kind of a self-funding model. A lot of the original builders are gone. We talked about talent pool shrinking, and then that data is constrained oftentimes on the mainframe. You want to unlock that data. You want more real-time data, et cetera, to do all of the cool AI and data. So, this is the realities of, I think, what companies are faced with, and we'll talk about a little bit and how this starts. So, Barry, I think as a company, if I'm on this journey, how does this start? Where do you start with this massive problem?
Yeah, it all starts with business alignment. That is the most important part of the whole journey is alignment with the business. Executive sponsorship is critical. And it's that business alignment and that sponsorship is something that has to happen through the entirety of the journey from start to end, right? In many cases, if it's a technology-led transformation, the the results are mixed, right? So business alignment, executive sponsorship is really, really important, and that has to be sustained, right? And so as we engage with customers, that's the first thing that we want to talk about are what are those business challenges, what are those constraints, and then, and work as partners to help solve that, right? Once that business alignment is established, then we can get into more of the actionable items, such as the consulting, application reviews and disposition plans, as well as helping with business cases, which, as we said, is often difficult to build a mainframe modernization business case, and we'll share with you a bit more about that. That engagement also will drive out solution architecture, and all of that is wrapped with a robust program, and that program, just like business alignment, has to be there for the entirety of that transformation. Another important part of this, where we see greater success in the overall modernization journey, is when we support organizational change. And if you think about the heritage mainframe people who have been doing this work for 20 or 30 years, they know the business logic, they know the requirements of the business, they know the code, the integrations, everything. And so now as we actually go and modernize, which we'll talk about, and we introduce modern code or new platforms and new technologies, then how do you manage all of this incredible knowledge and help them on their journey to these new platforms? But again, to wrap it up, business alignment is essential.
So one thing to interject here, so there's tools on the market. We have one called Exit Legacy. It helps accelerate code modernization, et cetera, and there's many others on the market, and we're partners with some of them. If I'm getting pressure from my organization to just say, grab a tool off the shelf, the vendor told me it automates this stuff, why are you spending so much time planning? If you just want to be off to the races with that approach, what's the risk in doing that?
Well, again, I think that's the risk is that it's a technology-led approach, and if we rush for those results, again, the results will be mixed, right? It needs to be a strategic engagement, and we'll talk about this a bit, but it really application revenue-led, right? What is most important to the business, and let's focus our attention there versus rushing to throw a technology solution at the problem.
Right, thank you.
So we talk about the challenge with building a business case, and again, most of the business leaders and CIOs are very happy to build business cases that are greenfield applications representing new revenue streams, of course, right? And so it's a little more difficult in the mainframe world because you have this sort of sunk cost and all this complexity. But really, it comes down, it's a financial conversation, and so you really have to hit that head on. So our message to our customers is that we want to offer you 20% reduction in mainframe run costs in year one, right? And that's achieved through leverage labor pools, primarily software optimization. That is a huge expense, right? Which is generally going to drive down your MIPS reduction, and depending on your licensing model, that's going to affect a cost reduction. There's also another cost lever, which is a migration, which is really a rehosting of mainframe, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit more. But 25% reduced run costs, I think I said 20%, 25% reduced run costs year one. That is the objective. Then if you shift into your data center costs, which I said is a big cost lever, and you might ask, how can I eliminate that at 100%? Well, you can. If you make the commitment to modernize your mainframe landscape, that is going to allow you to exit your mainframe. That's going to allow those peripheral systems that have always been so tightly integrated with the mainframe to finally be refactored and moved as well. So you can shut down your data center and eliminate that cost, and then use that money, that cash, to actually help you with the rest of your transformation. The next financial trigger is a 50% sustained savings. This is 50% reduction in run savings for the life of the program at the completion of transformation. Here's what I mean. As we go through our transformation journey, we're achieving savings along the way, but as we complete our transformation, we're going to achieve 50% or greater sustained savings. And that's really eye-opening. If you think about your mainframe spend today, let's say it's $10 million a year, and you can bring $5 million to your bottom line, that's going to catch people's attention. That's going to help with the business case. In terms of agility, right, this is obviously a bit harder to quantify, but as we're bringing mainframe apps and data and tools into cloud, then naturally the agility level increases exponentially. Right? Those again are sort of the opening volleys that we like to talk about when we're helping with business cases. From an Atos perspective, what do we offer? What do we do? This is a bit of a tactical view, highly focused on mainframe. We have what we call M3, which is manage, migrate, and modernize. So quickly on these, manage is largely as it sounds. It's a walk-in takeover of an environment. It's bringing in smart, efficient labor. It's being highly focused on software optimization, looking at third-party software spend, for example, and seeing how that can be optimized and improved, right? It's also a very, very important point for learning. So as you think about a sort of commencement of service of an environment, you're learning about that entire ecosystem end to end, the data, the apps, the integration, the peripheral systems, all of those things. And that's really important because by understanding the complexities of that landscape, that's going to allow you to build a higher quality transformation plan, which is going to earn you more success down the road. Migrate is an opportunity to rehost a mainframe with an Atos, we call it the mainframe hub or mainframe as a service, to rehost a mainframe with Atos mainframe hubs. You might ask, why would I do that when we're trying to go to AWS? There's a use case and a business case for some clients to do so. Specifically, if our customers have a long time horizon to modernize their mainframe environment, let's say 5 years, right? We can increase potentially their cost savings by rehosting them along the way during their cloud journey onto an Atos hosted environment to increase their cost savings, which is going to shift to transformation. So ultimately, it can actually help with the transformation. Modernize, this is the bullseye, and this is where everyone wants to be. In order to achieve that 50% or greater savings perpetually, you need to modernize, you need to transform. So this is where you get your sustained savings and also where you achieve your agility. Right? So that's M3 at a glance. Manage, migrate, modernize. Quickly on mainframe transformation. This is, I get a bit of a busy slide, but conceptually it's actually really, really simple. It's a simple view of how we help with self-funding a modernization. On the left is your operational cost, and on your right is your transformational investment. And as you look at this, you have different modes of operation on the left, different modes to operate the mainframe ecosystem, right? And those different modes of operations are going to yield varying degrees of savings. Those savings shift over to transformation. And that transformation budget is what's going to allow you to actually affect change in your environment to bring apps and data into AWS, right? The more you transform, the greater you reduce your run cost, the greater you can transform, and we call it a virtuous cycle. And we continue that until we complete the transformation. So conceptually, it's very simple. It's really about helping our customers self-fund.
Barry, on this, another question I think people always ask is this kind of the only model if I have an accelerated time frame, I need to shut my mainframe down, or I think I can do it in 1 to 2 years? Can I fund that, or are there other models that could be used?
Yeah, I mean, if you have the money to do so, right? And some businesses do, or if they want to accelerate, then they may make a decision to invest significant portions of their own money above and beyond their current run cost to help with the transformation. But generally, in terms of an approach that helps self-fund and reduces run costs while funding transformation, we find that this is an approach or a series of approaches that is most effective. Yeah. So, with that, a bit more specific. This is where we want to talk about our modernization patterns. And We have really sort of two views on that. We have a bit of a physical view and a virtual view, which will follow this, right? So the physical view, if you think of this in the perspective of data center and mainframe in the data center and the difficulty that you've had exiting your data center because you have your mainframe, this is a physical view that helps us to solve that challenge. And if you look at the top left, this is far and above the most preferential approach. And it's fairly simple in terms of its approach, which is rehosting your mainframe at the cloud edge. It is putting a mainframe at a colo right next door to an AWS zone, right? Why? Well, the reason why is because the reason that we can't move mainframes out of the data center is because of performance. If you didn't have the latency concerns that you have, then you could move your mainframe and leave your peripheral apps and all that. At the end of the day, anyone, and many of you have explored this, it's about latency. So by moving your mainframe to the AWS zone or the edge, you're eliminating that challenge. And your latency is so low that you're actually, you could consider, it's as though you're putting a mainframe inside the walls of an AWS data center. It gives you a lot of freedom because you can move data and apps and tools into and out of AWS with a whole lot more freedom than you could do otherwise, right? And you can do a lot of exploratory work too. Maybe you want to move your dev or your test. So it is far and above the most preferential option. There are some other approaches, all right? And I mentioned that optional mainframe hosting environment that Atos has today. That's an option, right? Bear in mind that there's about a 10 millisecond delay to the nearest AWS zone, and we're trying to make that better. Another is AWS local zone consumption. Some clients may need to retain their private data center for whatever reason, but they still need to remove their mainframe from that private data center, but they have that latency concern. So think about this approach as really more of a regionalized approach where you've got your private data center, your mainframe at a colo at an AWS local zone. And then finally, you have cloud to mainframe. And this is something that many of our clients are exploring. It's about bringing Outposts to your mainframe and doing some exploratory work and some early integration with AWS. The last thing, not depicted here, is you can do nothing. You can leave your mainframe where it sits today, and you can work to modernize your data and apps logically and then work around the physical constraints. So with that, I want to shift into more of a logical view. This is really more of an apps and a data view. A few really key points here. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? There are many different ways through the mainframe modernization journey that you can modernize, right? So while emulation and code modernization are clearly the most popular and fastest movers, at the end of the day, or 2 years from now, you may determine that you need to be more transformative and consume a different modernization pattern. So not a one-size-fits-all approach. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you look at modernization through the lens of data and applications, integration, third-party software, and other facets of your mainframe environment, you can apply modernization patterns to any one of those, which is a really, really sound approach. And another consideration for you is, as you think about your data and apps and software, you could also think about what is the cost for each of those. And you might develop a modernization plan that attacks those most costly areas of your mainframe environment earlier so that you have a better cost free up to help fund your transformation, right? So again, the point here, not a one-size-fits-all approach, and that there's many different ways to do this, and probably twice as many as even depicted here. This is kind of a broad view. But quickly here, I mentioned emulation and code modernization or translation. Those are definitely the most popular modernization options. With emulation is literally running your mainframe on technology emulators that are running on x86, that are on EC2 and AWS, right? It is an emulation. It's a fast mover. It's a lower risk because there's no code changes, right? It's definitely a popular option. The one thing to keep in mind is that there's a low degree of transformation because you're actually not really changing anything, but you are exiting your mainframe, but you're not actually changing business logic, right? But fast mover and also a great option to accelerate your exit from a data center, right? So a lot of good qualities here. Code modernization or translation. This is another fast mover with a bit more transformation taking place. The best examples are taking, say, COBOL or Assembler or PL1 and modernizing that into a Java or .NET stack, right? That's pretty popular method. And with that modernized code can be, of course, virtualized, it can be containerized, et cetera, and then, that has its own journey, right? This is a really good option. Code modernization is a good option to address that acute mainframe resource skill shortage that many of us have today, right? Because you're eliminating a lot of the risk associated with the legacy code because now you're moving into modern cloud. So that's another reason that a lot of customers will consider code modernization. Replacement with COTS, a transformative option. If you're running ERP on mainframe today and you want to replace that with a SaaS-based version, that's perfectly fine. Maybe you're running SAP on mainframe today and you want to run SAP in a cloud SaaS tomorrow, that's fine, right? The thing to keep in mind with COTS is you very much have to understand the business logic and business requirements before and after as you build that into your new SaaS platform. Platform enhancement, right? So you might ask, why platform enhancement? Why would I want to enhance my mainframe platform? Well, again, going back to that mainframe, that modernization journey, you might have a long time horizon, and you might have a lot of valuable data that's locked up in your mainframe, and you want to integrate with your mainframe using emulation, API calls, et cetera, and open up that data to your DevOps team, et cetera, right? So you're consuming into and out of AWS in your mainframe. Part of the journey, right? Incremental application refactor. This is where we're getting into far more transformative approaches, right? Best examples here are taking legacy databases, say DB2, and bringing that into RDS Postgres, for example. No small feat, because there's a lot of complexity in the data and the data controls and the jobs and the logic, but it is a transformative and really great option because now you're on a modern cloud data platform and you're enjoying all the benefits of AWS. You're getting exposure to those analytical engines that you didn't have before, or if you had them, you were paying a whole heck of a lot of money for them, right? So it is a good approach, again, for now beginning to truly consume modern cloud services. Another refactor example is using modern app engines. If you go back to your code modernization and you've brought over .NET or Java, now you can bring that code into app engines or containers inside of AWS, and again, enjoy the same capabilities that you have within AWS and all of its services. Finally, you have Cloud Native Rebuild. So Cloud Native Rebuild is clearly the most transformative. It's the pinnacle, right? It requires the biggest investment, the greatest degree of business alignment and executive support because it's generally more costly, right? You're understanding what your business logic is, you're deconstructing that, you're rebuilding that with Cloud Native, right? It's a big undertaking, but it's all part of the cloud journey because remember, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And so as an example, if you go back to, say, an application rationalization plan and you see that, hey, these 3 applications derive the highest degree of revenue for my company, they are most strategic, so I'm going to make the most investment in those 3 critical applications, and so maybe I'm going to rebuild those into cloud, right? So that's, again, why this is a really important and highly transformative option. The other thing that I want to point out here, it's very interesting, is that we're beginning to see some really cool things happening with low code here, where we're understanding what the business logic is, and rather than go through a very expensive code upgrade or code rewrite, people are starting to look at low code, and that's being explored quite a bit more. So some pretty neat things happening there.
I think to add one thing and then maybe another question for you.
Sure.
So I think in the code translation and the completely refactoring, the difference I'd like to clarify is some people kind of use the term JOBOL, meaning what you get out of a translation is just, for example, COBOL turned into Java, but it's basically still procedural. It's not going to be a microservice. It's not even going to really look like object-oriented programming. It's so a Java programmer can read it, can update it, et cetera. They don't have to know COBOL, but you're not going to get the same kind of futuristic application when you go through that. And that's what Barry mentioned. When you go for a full native rebuild, as an example, you're going to think about that in a modern way, using serverless, microservices, functions, all sorts of things that you can take advantage of that you wouldn't get. But again, it's the tools that we have and others have to do that are typically get you a much higher percentage of automation there than you get with a full native, because you have to stop and think, and a human actually has to think about your business. Okay, now I have this pseudo automation. What are microservices based on how my business works and how I break that down? So to kind of think about it like that as you're looking at tools for accelerating the journey. And then, and I guess, Barry, if you were to guess on here in those tools in that landscape, the automation, how far can you get with the automation in terms of percentages roughly with these types of approaches?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we certainly have a great deal of IP in our own tools and tech, but we also certainly work with a lot of partners, and you'll hear from partners varying degrees of automation. So some people will say that they can automate at 100%. My suggestion is to question that and understand what do you mean by 100% automation, because I don't think that that's entirely possible. Generally, and it's a tough question to answer because you've got to have 10 million lines of code, right? And so 95% sounds really great, but 95% of 10 million lines of code is a heck of a lot of code, right? So it depends. The answer is it's an it depends answer, right? But if you're automating at code conversion at 99% and a large legacy code base, that's pretty darn good, right? But those are some of the things you have to be careful with. The tools are great. There's many tools. The technology is great. Just understand that you have to have that know-how to ask the right questions and to be sure that you have the right talent to actually go and complete that code conversion.
And I think that ties back to the first slide in terms of the approach. Is it that consultative approach to make sure you're matching? Also, it's not a one tool fit your whole journey. You oftentimes will use multiple tools because you'll have different clusters of things you're trying to do with different applications. So you might, as Barry said, all 6 of these approaches in here and some of the physical approaches will probably be a part of your journey in some way, shape, or form.
All right. And just a few brief comments on capability from Atos. So I'll be brief. So a couple of key differentiators in terms of the know-how and the credibility and being able to complete those automations, right? Atos has a really, really long, proud history with mainframe infrastructure and hosting. We have a highly, highly capable application modernization practice, and we also have a really incredible cloud transformation practice. And by the way, thanks to a lot of good acquisitions. So together, if there's a lot of power in having 40 years of mainframe infrastructure and hosting experience, a really deep practice in app mod, and then a lot of very, very recent and relevant cloud transformation. And if you wrap all of that with a really strong advisory practice that is aligned to the business and helping to build those strategic business plans with our customers, that's really important, right? That's really important to have that business alignment, not leading from a technology angle. Some other things, Atos does have a lot of IP for modernization. We have a platform called Exit Legacy, which is an assembly of roughly 35 different tools that we use that does everything from different types of code modernization and automating that to different types of data and modernizing the data. And it's really an automation framework that is modernizing all of these different paths, data, apps, code, et cetera. And again, we also work very closely with partners, right? We don't pretend that our tools are the best. There's a time and a place, and we want to pick the best tool for the job, right, to be clear. We do have some great industry recognition by some of the large analyst firms in terms of our capability as well. And then finally, just a real brief success story. It's about 2 years ago in this success story where one of the largest banks in the country approached us seeking help to help them with the problem they were having with their credit card applications, fraud detection, and analytics. They knew what they needed, of course. They're very, very smart and leading edge, but they were constrained by their current environment, and they didn't have scale, and they had a private data center. So we worked with this bank to help them to refactor their COBOL applications into Java, to rehost the entirety of this business function into AWS. It was, considering the sheer size of this bank and the volume of their transactions, quite a monumental lift. The net result of that is agent performance, their ability to execute 50% improvement, fraud detection because of increased analytics became far more accurate and better, right? And the actual processing of credit cards through the life cycle of credit cards in terms of application to usage, et cetera, could now all be viewed very well because of the analytics made available to them in AWS. So it was really good success stories, and we have others. That takes us through our story today. We are more than happy to take any questions that you might have.
I'm going to run the microphone back. You want to try and shout it out, see if we can hear you?
We provide services on most of their applications are Mainframe. So the challenge that they had is with the code conversion. A lot of this makes total sense, and it's architecturally very feasible. So when it comes to code conversion, do you guys have any framework?
We do have a framework, but like a program framework, a technology framework.
You said, converting the COBOL to Java, right?
Yep.
So one of the requirements that our client had was to convert the mainframe of the COBOL to Golang, right? So basically what my question is, do you guys have a customized framework that you can provide to these kind of contractors so that they can take that and do some conversion? I mean, maybe automate it like 60%, 50%, and then customize on top of it.
We certainly do. Yeah, we do have those frameworks today. And generally, if we have, as I said, we want to choose the best tool, the best solution. Tool, people, right? We want the best solution for the problem. In this case, my first look would be, all right, let's look at our exit legacy, our own IP, and our framework, right, to see if that can achieve this code conversion for CMS or this organization, right? And if we determine through an early assessment where we're actually looking at the code, right, because that's what we want to do, is we want to look at that code base and understand it, that our tool may not be best suited for that, then we partner up and we will work to choose the best solution. But out of the gate, yes, we have a framework for that.
In essence, the tool's probably, it's two steps. The first is the analysis of the actual mainframe code to understand really what is there. Do you have orphaned code? What's kind of the clustering of which code is integrating with other code? So you're trying to assess that so you can try and eat the elephant one bite at a time. And then after you've laid out a roadmap based on where the business is going and what applications you want to start transforming, then the second step is the actual conversion of the code. And those tools, you kind of think of it as a side-by-side tool that you're looking at, where you have the legacy code here and the converted code on the right. And it will show you the converted code, as well as give you suggestions on things like microservices or functions you should be grouping together based on it seeing that this thing was called 17,000 times. It's probably something that you should wrap into a function that should be separated from other logic. So yeah, so there's tools. And when you go to full microservices level modernization, we see on average about 70%. You automate about 70%, and then the last 30%, you have to have humans, again, look at those clusters, make business decisions on what they want to get rid of, what they want to combine, and then the programmers kind of finish off the remaining part. But you do see a substantial acceleration with the tools that we have and that some other of our partners have.
Thanks for your question.
When just don't believe it, or me, because it is all practical things that they don't think they're going to find.
Yeah.
Unknown dependencies, the big wall of mud.
Yeah.
It's just not rational. What you have tools or approaches or case studies that help assuage the fear of the migration?
Yeah, we do. And I don't want to be the yes guy to all these questions, right? Because if we didn't, I'd say no. But that trust, what you just said underscores that whole business case challenge, right? That fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so we're very sensitive to that. And we're very sensitive to working with mainframe shops, people that have been doing this for 40 years, to come in and who's this crew to think that they understand our business process and our code, right? We get that. We get it all the time, right? So we're very sensitive to that, and we try to be as thoughtful as we can. And that is, and I know this is going to be very cliche, but it's truly about the collaboration and working together. It really absolutely is. And then in terms of actual executing and establishment of trust, we want to work with our customers on that. So perhaps it's, give us a sample data set. Give us a challenge that you have and allow us to do a code conversion on a sample data set, for example. Because the data is the easy part. It's the logic, right? The jobs, right? And allow us to go through that with you and see if we can begin to establish your trust. And then I guess I'll use the, one bite at a time, how to eat the elephant one bite at a time. And it's that sort of approach, but it's also taking that approach to try to, establish your trust so that you can rely on us to help you with that because it's your business.
Yeah, and I think it added, back in the planning step, we go through really a risk tolerance for each of those applications. And if there's low risk, meaning the application goes down after we convert, and it's not a big deal because it's some website that people check once a week, et cetera, then you don't overinvest in that. You're more reactive in nature. But we have clients who are financial institutions that are, if their stuff breaks, the market breaks. And so when you look at those applications, obviously you have to build in a lot more mitigation into if it goes down, how do you revert back to the mainframe? So you do things like run in parallel for periods of time through all of their core business processes to see that their day close, week close, quarter closes happen successfully because there is risk that you didn't find that little piece of business logic that only happens once a quarter because that's when you flip the quarter over and go to the street with a result if you're a financial institution and things like that. So, but that, again, you don't apply that level of risk to the whole ball of wax because then your ROI is gone and then you're stuck in mud. And then the fear and risk is the digital natives are taking you out because you're not moving at all. So we're seeing that fear rise, and it's helping offset the fear of doing nothing, but you have to have a pragmatic approach to kind of siphoning off your clusters of your applications, but you do have to invest heavily in the critical ones that cannot go down, and you cannot see, and that's with the financial institution we're dealing with. They can't just say, I'm not going to process credit, and we do credit card processors. We can't just not process credit cards today, or we don't want to take applications today. That cripples their business. So a lot of planning goes into that kind of run in parallel mitigation.
I hope that helps.
I guess this extends a little bit on risk. One of the models that you showed has a complete conversion to all cloud-native applications. If you did work with a client and got their data center all shut down, sunset, and all into cloud-native, what is their plan or what are their abilities in the few years after that if they, for example, can't maintain that relationship with your tooling? Do they have an exit strategy or are they really locked into using your tooling on like a subscription model and launch it?
There's no lock-in at all. And there's no lock-in at all with our specific to tooling at all. And as we work with our vendors, there is, as we work with our partners, we're always sensitive to that as well. What is the long term? What does that look like, right, in terms of recurring cost? There are some solutions, for example, that maybe are heavily reliant on emulation. And so you have that technology stack that you can't avoid, and you have to continue to pay for that. All right. In terms of a code modernization, as long as you're coming into open standards, there's no recurring cost. You're not stuck, right? So we, because, and again, we don't want to damage the ROI, right, either for any of our customers. So there is no lock-in. There generally is no lock-in unless, as I said, there's a specific technology reliance, like an emulation.
Yeah, they're one-time tools. They're used just for the conversion. After that, you're running on whatever target state you wanted, whether it's platform as a service stuff from Amazon, all full stack Java, Microsoft. You kind of choose what you want to run on target-wise. Unless you're doing an emulation on something like a Micro Focus, then you're sending a contract to emulate for some period of time.
Anyone else?
What's your strategy working with the people that have all the different knowledge? Seems like usually global programmers are in the field, you mentioned. What's your strategy so that they can be retrained? Do you retrain them? Is that part of the plan? Like, how do you work with them so that they give you the knowledge, the business knowledge?
Yep.
And they know they're not going to.
Yeah.
They're out of a job the next day.
It's a great question, and it's a delicate balance, right? So first, a lot of the people that are in those situations are close to retirement. So sometimes that reskilling, that individual roadmap is maybe not even necessary because there's a retirement pending. But where that's not the case, we very much want to retain and work really hard to retain that skills-based, because they understand not so much the code really, but it's the logic that code is providing and what it's serving for the business. And so we very much want to retain that talent, and certainly where it's right for the individual, reskilling is an important part of that. So whatever that is, maybe if we're going to potentially retrain them in Java or whatever. But again, I would say it's more of an individual challenge. We have an acute shortage of those types of individuals today as it is. There's no shortage of opportunities for those people who want to continue to work. But for those who want to reskill, I mean, there's just an infinite number of options for them and to help retain them so that we can kind of de-risk these transformations.
Yeah, and those who didn't hear, because I know the question was up front, but the question was around how do you handle people who have all the legacy skills, give you all of their knowledge for the transformation, but then are fearful for what their role is in the organization after the fact. So yeah, as Barry said, change management is a huge part of these transformation plans to making sure, and I think as we all see, there's no shortage of need for cloud architects, developers, et cetera. So every organization has a landing spot for those people on the other side. But there is a little bit of a change in whether it's programming skills or modern DevOps capabilities in the automation they're learning and the things they need to learn. But we see a mix of people, it's up to the individual that want to go for it, and others are fine riding out another year or two and hanging it up. So, great question.
I think that's it. Well, thank you all very much. Really appreciate the turnout. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure our contact information is here. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody.